Hello, guitar nerds of the internet. This is a 1976 Marshall Super Lead, and it sounds like this. Not great, but when you shut it off, it comes to life. So we're going to try to fix this. I think that it's a caps.
Six in the morning.
So we are in my lair looking at the insides of this amp, and we can see, maybe you can see, that this capacitor has some brown gunk coming out of it back there. And then a lot of the caps have kind of, you can see there, you can see there, you can see there. These bigger capacitors have started to leak, so that is not good. And then you can also see that someone has been in here. You can see that because there's no other carbon comp resistors in here. And then they have this, looks like a 1/4 watt resistor in parallel. I don't know what that's all about. This one looks like it's been replaced. This electrolytic, they just tagged it into the board. They didn't pull the board out. We're going to pull the board out. We're going to replace those. I didn't notice that. We might end up replacing that. This resistor. I'll have to see what value it is. Then we're also going to replace this capacitor down here. So we have 3 capacitors here. In all of these big can caps, we have 1 here, we have 4 here, and then we have 1 under the board. We're going to replace those.
6.5 hours later. 75 years later. 2,000 years later.
We're replacing those can caps with these F&Ts. You may have also noticed this. When I first saw this, I'm like, oh, that's probably a master volume. That's not what that is. That is, for some reason, someone stuck a pot in between the treble. I don't know why. To tune in the treble more? It's stupid. So we're going to take that out, and we're going to replace that with that. Put that back to stock. Let's do this.
Thousands of tears later.
Well, after many hours of work, the caps have been replaced, amongst other things, which is great. Let's talk about what we did. And by we, I mean me. I replaced these multi-section can caps. You can see 4 of them here, and then 1 of them here. This is a 50-50. These are 100-100 that originally, the ones that came out were not multi-section. It was just 1 200. So you could see that I bridged these to run them in parallel. So these are 200 now each. This is an example of the one I pulled out, one of these dailies. Oh, look at that gunk coming out of it. Yeah, these caps are bad. This is why the amp sounded bad. So I took out all those. The 50-50s, although that's looking a little bulgy. You can see that they all kind of have these bulges. This is the only one where there's actual gunk coming out of it. So those came out. I replaced those. Someone had poorly replaced this one, this cap. They had just tied in. You can see some other spots too where someone just tied in. They don't want to take this board out. They were too lazy, so they just clipped the lead and then just soldered to the lead, which I guess is a viable option. I don't prefer it. I'd rather take this whole board out and solder directly to the board, because you never know if when you solder back onto this, like if you heat it up, you might disconnect it a little bit, screw up the connection on the PC board on the other side. So you never really know what's going on back there unless you really pull it out. So to take this board off, I had to take these off. These are from the power transformer. And I would have loved to be able to clip these leads back and make this look a little prettier, but there's not a whole lot. There's like no room to do that. So it is what it is. It's all well connected now. This resistor here on this is a 15K, which is what was in there, but it was a, I had mentioned the, let's see, can I find it? It's this carbon comp that was also cut off and tied in to the leads there. And then someone had put a little tiny 1/4 watt resistor running that in parallel. So that was not running at 15K anymore. If you look on this thing, it actually says 27K. That's for the 100 watt version that runs 4 EL34s. This one runs the 6550s, so that's a 15K resistor there. So I put this 1/2 watt 15K resistor in there while I had the board out. I don't know if this should be a 1 watt resistor or a 1/2 watt is fine. I assume the 1/2 watt is fine if it was working fine with a 1/4 watt. I mean, and I guess working fine is debatable because I'm fixing it. But I left a little air gap at the bottom so that if it gets a little warm, it's not going to overheat, hopefully. Time will tell. You can see some other resistors here. These have been cut and resoldered onto the leads. So these two got replaced. This resistor got replaced. And then this here, I had to run 2 in parallel to get to 330. These are metal on the outside, but it actually has a plastic coating. After I installed this and cut it and soldered it all in, I got worried that that shrink might, once there's heat in here, might shrink further and might actually expose the metal. And I don't want one of these leads to ground across here and cause an issue. So I put some electrical tape. It's not a pretty solution, but it's a solution. Had I thought about that potentially shrinking before, I would have put heat shrink tubing on these leads that got attached. But there wasn't a lot of good solutions at that point. So that is the best of the worst solutions that I could think of. And that might never be an issue, but I just don't want it to become an issue. What else did we do? So I cleaned all of these pots. I cleaned out the switches with contact cleaner. And here was a pot. This pot was connected to this. So this red was connected to the brown lead that normally gets connected to the center tap of the treble. I don't know if this is some way to try to mitigate the crazy highs of a Marshall, but it's dumb. Like, I don't know why you would want to do that. So I put another cliff jack in there and had to rewire it. And interestingly enough, when they wired this, when they took this out, whoever worked on this and put that stupid pot in there left. So this all is supposed to go to ground, and this goes to ground here theoretically, but there was nothing connecting that to ground over here. So that wasn't great. So I had to run a wire from this to ground on this, because this is actually where the ground wire is. It comes up and connects to this kind of unfortunate looking bus, this grounding bus right there. I resoldered these connections to ground just to make sure they looked a little sketch. Interestingly enough, when I went to rewire this pot, I barely touched this purple lead. Popped right off. So, yay. Good thing we found that. Now all you have to do is bias the thing. Let's go through that process. When you turn it on, let it warm up a bit before you bias it, because the tubes, as they get warmer, they're going to draw more current. So if you do it within 1 minute of turning it on, you're going to bias it too hot. So don't do that. So first thing you have to do to bias it, you have to check the plate voltage. Plate voltage is 458. Then you want to check what the bias rating is. So it's 55. To find what the bias should be, you take the wattage of the tube. These are 6550s. So 6550s allow for 35 watts of plate dissipation. You multiply that by the percentage that you want to allow. With guitar amps, it's usually 70%. So you multiply that times 70% or 0.7. You then divide that by our plate voltage. 458 means we should be at 53 MA. We're a little bit higher than that, so we're going to knock it down a little bit. Now, when you're biasing an amp, it's extremely dangerous. And as many times as I said it's dangerous, it's more dangerous than that. You don't want to use one of those jeweler screwdrivers that's all metal. You want something that if this accidentally touches something, it's not going to kill you. We just want to bring this down. Let's bring it down to 52. Good enough. We are all biased up and we are ready to go. Let's go see if this thing sounds any better. All right, so now that I've replaced the caps and done all that work, cleaned the pots, all the pots are nice and quiet. Nothing makes any noise. It's up the amp. This is what it sounds like now. Super loud, super good. It's like being hit upside the head with a frying pan. Take it easy.